Vacation. Finally, just you and me together, Natalie exclaimed, thrilled at the thought of spending time alone with her husband, Henry, in a hotel. She yearned for a few weeks of peace, free from her mother-in-law's incessant moralizing and nagging, which had already worn her down in just a couple of months. "Natalie, my son is used to healthy eating. Why do you keep buying these pre-packaged meals? Can't you make proper cutlets? What did your mother ever teach you?" Her mother-in-law would grumble, perplexed by how her son had ended up with such a clumsy wife. "And who washes dishes like that? Why do you use so much soap? Do you think that's good for your stomach? It's just chemistry. Here, take some baking soda. It's the safest option, trust me," her mother-in-law would advise. Emma had been a skilled homemaker. She could sew, cook, and even manage livestock. But she preferred not to dwell on the fact that her husband had left her for another woman despite her best efforts to maintain their life together. Though she was content with her son, she couldn't understand why he had decided to marry at just 20. He never listened to her, and she had only his best interests at heart. Thankfully, they still lived with her, allowing her to keep an eye on him. Henry didn't care whether he had steamed cutlets or something else. What mattered to him was having his beautiful, young wife by his side. He couldn't fathom parting with her, even if the food was sometimes oversalted or undercooked. Ironing his own shirts was the least of his worries. He had married for love, not for culinary expertise. It was a shame that Natalie's mother didn't approve of her, but she was confident that love would come with time, especially once they had children. The couple viewed their long-awaited seaside trip as a much-needed escape, a sanctuary of freedom and tranquility where they could enjoy their love without interference. Natalie's mother had a frustrating habit of bursting into their room during the day, calling out for her son when the couple was least expecting it. Whether it was to hang up laundry or take out the trash, she seemed to believe that all romantic activities happened only at night. This was just another reason why they longed for some time away, where they could finally be alone. As newlyweds and still students, Natalie and Henry had yet to afford their own apartment or even a rental. Having spent a lot on their wedding, they were slowly saving for a vacation, and summer had finally arrived, bringing with it the long-awaited trip. They hadn't really had a honeymoon, so this felt like a chance to escape. Natalie's relationship with her mother-in-law was strained. She was a critical woman, always finding fault with something. Still, they couldn't yet afford a different living situation, making the opportunity for a little time away from her mother-in-law a precious gift for the young couple. Emma's constant advice and moralizing only made them want to flee, but they had nowhere to go just yet. While Natalie was busy shopping for outfits, sunscreen, and packing their suitcases, Henry was anxiously trying to figure out how to tell his mother about their trip. She was irrationally terrified of being apart from her son, even for a few days, so he knew he needed to prepare her for the news. Before the wedding, Henry and Natalie traveled everywhere together, so Emma couldn't fathom her son being away from her for so long. She refused to acknowledge that her boy had grown up and started his own family, seeing Natalie as a treacherous intruder who had taken a piece of her son's affection. Emma had raised Henry almost single-handedly. He was her only child, and she didn't want to share him with anyone. Yet, despite her discontent, he chose to marry. Emma didn't care for Natalie at all. She found her plain, without a notable background, and forced a smile to avoid upsetting her son. What a choice, she lamented to her best friend, as if no suitable girls existed in the world. Who could she possibly have children with those hips? She's only 40 kilograms. What is holding her up? And her cooking. It's a disaster, and Henry just smiles and pretends everything's fine. Yet the chick turned out to be quite determined, having escaped from the provinces, attended college, and snagged a handsome groom. True, her mother-in-law wasn't the most pleasant, but relatives were a lottery one couldn't choose. When Emma learned that Henry and Natalie were going on vacation without her, for 2 whole weeks, she panicked. How could she live without her son? And more importantly, how could he live without her? This chick wouldn't take care of him. They'd probably indulge in all sorts of unhealthy food down south, and Henry had gastritis. If they were going on vacation, it had to be together. Otherwise, she wouldn't let him go. The whole plan had come out of nowhere at the end of August, the prime time for canning. But she thought the sea air wouldn't hurt her either. Why hadn't they offered to take her along sooner? They had plotted this without her, and she hadn't seen the sea in 5 years. Being alone was daunting. Though she wasn't old, she imagined palm trees and warm sand, or even pebbles. Anything was better than missing out. As a pensioner, she'd have to spend her own money. It wouldn't be fair to expect anything from the young couple. But she deserved a vacation too. When Natalie heard that Emma planned to join them, she was horrified. The idea of spending their long-awaited vacation with a mother-in-law who was more annoying than a bitter radish filled her with dread. We need to come up with a plan, she thought, frantically brainstorming how to keep her mother-in-law at home. Emma seemed blissfully unaware that she was unwelcome. She didn't want someone who would pry into everything and lecture them on their getaway. Natalie was determined to find a way, drawing on her theater training to devise a believable scheme that would make Emma grateful to stay behind. And then an unexpected solution struck her. It was so clever that even Natalie surprised herself with her ingenuity. What wouldn't she do for peace and quiet? Her gaze fell on the old refrigerator, and a wild idea crept into her mind. What if she secretly broke it? If no one suspected a thing, she could get a new one, leaving her mother-in-law to deal with the problem instead of relaxing. Besides, Emma had recently canned a ton of jars and frozen berries from their summer cottage, so the loss of the refrigerator would be a real disaster. It would also serve as a solid excuse for her not to go south with the young couple. Natalie decisively cut the wire of the refrigerator, causing it to stop working immediately, exactly what she needed at that moment. She was still plagued by guilt for damaging someone else's property, especially since it hadn't been hers to begin with, but she hadn't thought of another way to convince her mother-in-law not to go, and time was running out. After all, a refrigerator could be replaced, but her peace of mind was priceless. Perfect, it's broken. Let her deal with finding a new one. The priority now is to buy time, especially since the tickets are for the day after tomorrow. Plus, Henry's mother's ticket can easily be refunded, especially now that she'll need to spend money on a new refrigerator. Natalie reassured herself, trying to cultivate a positive mindset despite feeling like a scheming criminal. When Emma discovered the refrigerator was broken, she was dismayed, and her blood pressure spiked. It was infuriating, especially now that she had fresh produce, canned goods, and even farm-fresh meat to consider. What an unexpected expense. You go without me, son. I need to buy a new refrigerator or wait for a repairman to check the old one. I have no idea what went wrong, but it seems like the time has come for it to go. How frustrating, especially at such an inconvenient moment. Emma lamented. Repairman? That hadn't even crossed Natalie's mind. Would her mother-in-law really try to fix the refrigerator now? A technician would likely figure out what happened right away. It wouldn't be hard to see that someone had tampered with it. Emma, don't worry. That fridge was ancient anyway. It's high time for a replacement. And don't stress about the cost. I received a nice vacation bonus. Choose any new one you want, and I'll cover it, Natalie readily offered. It was unfortunate that Emma wouldn't be going with them, but Natalie quickly added, Next year, I promise we'll help with a trip." What a caring daughter-in-law she is, Emma thought, momentarily reconsidering her feelings. Maybe she had been too harsh. After all, the girl wasn't all that bad. So what if she wasn't the best housekeeper? She'd learn. She was still young. Let them enjoy their vacation. She'd take care of the household chores, buy a new refrigerator, and make homemade preserves. After all, this was the peak season for canning. The sea wasn't going anywhere. The young couple returned from their vacation blissfully happy, sun-kissed, and as it turned out, expecting a little one. Who knows how much longer they might have waited for their rosy-cheeked miracle if it hadn't been for the broken refrigerator.